So, hi, Jim. Thanks so much for joining me to have a chat about how it all began, the early years. We've just seen a video of 40 years of Molly Maid since it was started in the UK, some amazing achievements and memories. But of course, it all began back in 1979, didn't it? 45 years ago. So, Jim, take us back. How did you hear about Molly Maid? How did you get involved, and why Molly Maid?
I'll take you back way before Molly Maid started to give you a better idea of perspective. Um, I grew up in the 40s and 50s, and my mom had a favorite comedian in those days. Her name was Phyllis Diller. And Phyllis Diller had a philosophy on housework. That philosophy was it can't kill you, but why take the chance? And my mom bought into that philosophy. So we had a cleaning lady from the time, for as long as I can remember. And so I grew up in a household that had a cleaning lady. Back in the 70s or 60s and 70s, after I'd grown up and gone to university, I'd gone into the corporate world, and I decided that I wanted to start my own business. And that business was going to be, we were going to become the Canadian franchisor for US franchises. And we were going to handle US franchises in Canada. That was my concept. And I formed a company to try to start that business. Started one in the haircutting business. We were the Canadian franchisor for a chain of haircutting salons. And I wanted to get into the maid service business. And I talked to two franchises in the United States, actually three. I talked to one, they'd already awarded a master franchise for Canada. But there were two others that I was looking at. When I was talking to them, I thought, why not do a competitive review and see what I'm going to come across when what we're going to have to compete with. And I came across Molly Maid as part of that review.
So you've heard about Molly Maid. So how did you get involved, and why did you invest?
So I came across Molly Maid. I was looking at it. It was a Monday morning. I found out about it. I saw a car. I called the lady. I went up to the car. Of course, spoke to the maid in the car, and then she referred me to somebody else. So the person who I should be contacting, I spoke to the woman, and who referred me to Chris Stringer. Chris and I met that afternoon. Chris laid out what his plans for Molly Maid were, what his philosophy was. And I bought it. I thought was a great guy. That afternoon, when we finished, I was just going to meet my fellow investors in the haircutting business, and we went for dinner. And they gave me the go ahead and begin negotiations with Chris Stringer to buy the company. And it's strange. It was 4 days later. I had left for the United States. Chris and I made phone calls back and forth and couriered back and forth. Faxes and were just coming in. Email hadn't been invented at that point in time. But we, in 4 days, had reached an agreement. When I came back to Canada, Chris and I met for dinner, and over dinner and drinks, we signed an agreement, or I had the outline for an agreement, which was consummated the following week. We spoke to our lawyer first thing Monday morning and had an agreement done. So it was within 10 days of meeting Chris that we had a firm agreement in place.
Wow. So you identified the business, you had a chat with the owner, you invested, and you began. But what was it about Chris and Adrian's philosophy that you connected with?
Well, what I liked about, let me talk about the first of all, the market. I knew the market was going to be growing. We had a huge increase in husband and wife family, wife working. That was the projected future. That was going to be that segment of the market was projected to double in the next 20 years. And the reason was more and more women were entering the workforce. And there was the women's liberation movement that helped quite a bit. Women wanted to get into business. This was a business that women could get into. Women were perceived as being able to do a whole bunch of things. And I believe women would make better managers. So this was creating an opportunity for women to run businesses. And I thought that was a huge opportunity. I love the fact that I would move 2 years ahead on the learning curve because Adrian and Chris already had customers and they had maids, people I could talk to and learn from and find out. I'd move that much further ahead to be able to build a business in Canada and beyond.
Right. Okay. So you began and really good market, good opportunity to get women back into the workforce. That's fantastic. But you got up and running with them. What were some of the early challenges you had, Jim? You and the franchise owners had in getting established.
Well, let's take what the first challenge we had was raising money, of course. And so, I had a line of credit on my house, which I had to use, and went to friends and relatives, and of course the bank of mom and dad to raise funds to open the business. I mean, banks didn't operate financing, didn't allow financing on concepts. They were strictly on fixed assets and cash flow. You pretty well had to have both. So that's the problem that most people have in business, and that's just the nature of the banking system. But another problem, when I bought the business from Adrian and Chris, the trademark was being challenged. There was a problem with the trademark, not a problem with it, but it was being challenged by an operator who said that it was confusingly similar. So I had to hire a trademark attorney and provide comfort to my investors that we were doing the right thing, that this trademark was going to work, that we were going to be able to own the trademark. Also, there was an agreement I had with Adrian and Chris with the Stringers to buy the company that was an area distributorship. And they had an area distributor already in place what we believed was an unethical operator, let's call it that. And we wanted to get rid of that unethical operator. We also wanted to get rid of the area distributor concept. So I hired a consulting firm who did a great job of determining our best way of expansion, how to do it through franchising rather than area distributors. And fortunately, my roommate in college was a member of that, senior member of that consulting firm. So I got great service at fairly low prices. Those were problems that we had. Then shortly in a couple of years into the business, we learned that the operating system that we had was illegal, that it wouldn't pass the Canada Revenue Agency. The first time we had an HMRC in the UK is what it would be. It's the first time we had an audit. That would lead to a class audit for everybody, and the business would have to fold because it fold under its own weight. That we were not independent contractors as we classified ourselves, that we had to convert to an employee business. At that time, we had awarded 15 franchises and had deposits for 3 other franchises when we learned what the problem was. We hired consultants again to see how we could get out of it, and then we conducted a meeting with the franchise owners to give them a presentation on what we learned and how we proposed to get out of it, offering every one of them their money back, their full franchise fee, or invest with us. Actually, we were providing the investment, providing the new operating system to them, but follow that new operating system so that we could operate legally and not surprisingly, everyone stayed because we had a great concept and we were doing very well in the marketplace.
And so, Jim, interestingly, they stayed with you. They trusted the brand. They saw the opportunity. They trusted the brand. They wanted to be a franchisee of your franchise. And I mean, at that stage, what did you think was most important attributes of a franchisee?
Oh, a willingness to work hard, a willingness to consider themselves sort of, they were our customers, but they were also our partners. And a willingness to feel that we were in a partnership, that we were all in this together. Those were the things that were really important to us. One of the things that happened after we made the change, all of the franchise owners made the change, and we became a legitimate operator. We lost about 30% of our staff. And the reason we lost about 30% of our staff because they were all getting benefits from the government. And if they were getting benefits from the government, they couldn't have a job.
Yeah.
And so we overcame that.
So what actually did help you overcome that, Jim? With the staff that stayed, what did you offer the staff that made them really want to work for Molly Maid then?
As I said, we lost 30% of the staff. They couldn't work for us and still collect benefits. But we had a large pool of people who wanted to join Molly Maid. We had in this business, you either have too many customers and not enough staff, or you have too many staff and not enough customers. We were just caught in that cycle where we had too many customers and not enough staff. But we filled it. We filled the roots up, and what we were offering was good compensation. Percentage compensation wasn't well known at that point in time. People only worked for hourly rates. But when maids figured out how much they were making, they were doing pretty well. And so, and we were a very good employer. We helped them out on a lot of things.
And Jim, we've just a couple of years ago introduced the best employer concept for Molly Maid UK in terms of what we do for our staff over here, and it's a majorly important part of our promotion of what we can offer our staff. So I think there's a great connection with what you experienced in the early days and what we can offer now. But as a marketeer, Jim, what did marketing look like in those early days? What did you use to market the business?
Let's start at the beginning with Adrian. When Adrian first introduced the business, nobody knew what housekeeping was. No, there was no business. There was no industry established at that point in time. So nobody'd heard of Molly Maid, but nobody'd heard of the cleaning industry either. So how Adrian started, she would park her car outside potential customer homes, and she would go after communities where she felt there were double income families and fairly substantial double income families, but you could tell by the housing what those families were going to look like. But she would park her car and then go up and knock on the door wearing a Molly Maid uniform or Molly Maid suit. And she would knock on the door and talk to people about that business and how it was going to be. She had to leave behind a single piece of paper that had a picture of Adrian and two maids, Adrian actually wearing that 18th century maid cap, and the two maids beside her wearing that 18th century maid cap, pictured in front of a Molly Maid vehicle, and she would leave that with the customers. We would get tons of business from that. And then once we were introduced, we would get a lot of referrals. So Molly Maid was one of the first to use branded vehicles, and not the first. First were Eaton's and Simpsons and UPS trucks. But we were the first in other industries that to use the branded vehicles.
That really shows right from from the outset, the power of the brand and the importance of branded cars, branded uniform, branded maids, and the power that has in terms of professionalism. But beyond that then, Jim, when you started to get some traction in the business, what other marketing tools did you use, marketing techniques to get more business?
Well, I'm every opportunity I get, I talk about customer contact. So it's not just getting customers, it's keeping them. And the best way of keeping customers is building a relationship with them. So I talk about that an awful lot. And here's another opportunity for me to talk about it. But the relationship is the most important thing in any business. And when we get the opportunity to talk to a customer, we can work to build that relationship. And they're more likely to continue with us. And it's a better investment from our perspective to build a relationship with a customer and try to keep that customer than trying to get new customers. It's just a better return on investment. You put some time into building the relationship, contacting the customer. You're going to understand what their hot buttons are. You're going to understand what happens in their household. You're going to understand so much more about that customers, and you'll be able to keep them much longer. Well, and the other thing is we did some research a number of years ago, and we found out that franchise owners who had contacted customers, those customers were likely to have a greater perception of the quality that they received from Maid than those customers who hadn't received contact from the franchise owner. There's a direct correlation between customer satisfaction and customer contact.
Sure.
It's extremely important. To me, it's the most important thing in our business.
Absolutely. And we see that now with cost of living going up. We've really got to keep on with the value of that relationship. And I think you also said that's one of the reasons why the estimate is so important, to actually visit customers for the first time rather than make the phone calls. So it's the initial contact, Jim, isn't it? As well as the ongoing contact.
The initial contact is critical. That's where you show your professionalism right off the bat. You get a chance to build a relationship with the customer. You learn the customers, the names of their kids, or the names of their pets and whatever. And you learn their hot buttons. You learn what's important to them.
Yeah.
This is a personal service business. This is I'd say it's the second most personal service business that there is. I mean, you're in customer homes. The most important thing to customers are, of course, their kids, number one, but their homes are number two. And so it's pretty high up on the level of importance is the cleaning service that they're getting and the relationship that they have with that business or the cleaner themselves or the company that's providing the service.
And just going back to marketing a little bit, Jim, the relationship absolutely key. When we're trying to get new customers to grow the business beyond the existing customers, what tools did we use, and how have you seen that change in recent years?
Okay, we leave the initial, of course, Adrian left just a piece of paper outlining the service to the customer back in the early days. We then introduced flyers. Flyers became an extremely important and critical means of getting new customers, particularly our door hanger flyers. I remember when we introduced door hanger flyers, but after, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years after that, I heard from a franchise owner that they had this Maid flyer that they had, and that's where they got our telephone number. And she saw the flyer, and we hadn't used those flyers for 7 years. So they do hang around for a long period of time.
Literally hang around. And no, and they still do, Jim. I think these days marketing has moved on from offline to online, obviously with the internet. But we always say marketing is about a mix of offline and online, and flyers still work. Flyers are particularly important for the older generation. So a lot of the traditional original marketing materials are just as important. So Have you seen any difference also in Molly Maid customers over the years and the types of Molly Maid customers and the profile of them?
Yeah, I think we're becoming so well known. Before we were targeting husband and wife, family, wife working. So we were mainly getting double income families. And a lot of the time we had cleans that we were going to where the customer wasn't at home. And that would tend to be young working families. The decision maker in those families, it was a shared decision to take a maid service, husband and wife making that decision, but it was always the wife's decision as who to pick.
Of
So
course.
we had seen that in the early years of our business, and that continued for a long period of time. But now we're seeing a lot more seniors, and I guess that's just the demographics of the age groups going through the population, and they're not. Well, they're interested in the cleaning, but they're more interested in the companionship, and they'd rather, they want to make sure their maids are going to be there so they can have a cup of tea with them and talk to them about their families and what's going on in their lives.
Absolutely. And we've got some wonderful relationships with our customers and the elderly customers. And that's why they want us to come back and back and back. And so it's great when we build that relationship again. It's that word, isn't it, Jim? Relationships.
It is.
And so you were operating in Canada and then there's an opportunity to develop into the UK. Tell us how that happened.
First thing I did on August 2nd, 1980, I applied for the trademark in the United States and the United Kingdom. So I had plans, at least in those days, to be in English-speaking markets. I wanted to be in the United States, of course, and in the United Kingdom. Incidentally, Molly Maid Molly is sort of an English name that means dependability. That's not where Adrienne got the name. She got the name from the play called The Unsinkable Molly Brown. And Molly was an indomitable spirit. And Adrienne was sort of that kind of indomitable spirit when she started out. Anyway, that's the way the name was found.
That's great.
Getting into the UK market, I had a friend who knew Malcolm Tall, who was the founder of Molly Maid in the United Kingdom. He had Malcolm Tall coming over for a visit. And I met with Malcolm, and Malcolm and I became fast friends. Malcolm invited me over to the United Kingdom to have my first visit to the United Kingdom. That was in 1983. And we made an agreement to go into the United Kingdom. Probably at that point, in 1983, that it came together in 1984. And so Malcolm was the first franchisee, but Pam wasn't in the picture at that time. Pam came in a little later. But when Pam came into the picture, that's when the business started to click in the United Kingdom. And she straightened the thing out, and Pam is the reason that we are so successful in the United Kingdom today.
I'm sure many in the audience will absolutely say hear to that comment, Jim.
Yes.
And how lucky we were, and the rest is history, as they say. Rest is history. And Jim, look, considering how much the business has grown around the world and in Canada and the UK, what do you feel the brand stands for today?
At the customer level, we're an iconic brand that people know and trust. And that trust will continue. And it will continue for a long time, as long as we keep understanding that the most important thing in this business is the relationship we have with our customers. And as long as we keep working on that relationship, as long as we do that, we will remain an iconic brand.
Jim, that's a wonderful way to finish this chat on that note, and a really memorable final wise words from you. I want to thank you from all of us for your time. You've got something more to add.
Let me just add customer contact. Did I tell you about customer contact?
I
Did
think
I
you
tell
might
you
have
how
done.
that was? Did I tell you how important that was? And the only way that anyone can understand whether they're satisfying customers is by talking to the customers. That's the
Jim,
most important. But did I tell you about that?
Jim, again, no apologies for repeating that. I think it's sound words, and your wisdom is very, very interesting to hear, very inspiring. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll all take all your comments on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. And best to everyone.